German channels.
Ah, okay. I'm already recording here. I see.
Where are you, Julian?
I am in Ely near Cambridge.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So very flat and very grey today. How about you, Thomas? Where are you?
Germany. This was the reason why I'm asking.
Yeah. My wife is half German, so I'm meant to be doing my German.
Oh, cool. Ah, hallo Mo, natürlich. Entschuldigung.
Schwanzan, are you using a different camera than usual, or is the internet connection not so good? Because your picture seems to be a little bit, how do you say, milky, or it's not as sharp as usual.
Maybe the light.
Or
Maybe.
it's the light. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know.
So I already started the recording. And we will start in 1 minute. Or we can start now. So, good evening, hello, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to this week's Monday Zen and Zazen class. Today I'm going to talk about Dogen Zenji's Fukan Zazengi, the instructions for Zazen. But before that, let's sit together for 30 minutes.
我们前面还是30分钟坐禅，然后今天讲普劝坐禅仪。
Thank you for joining. So today I want to continue my talk about the Fukan Zazengi. Let me share the screen. On the left side you have the English translation, on the right side you have the original written in classical Chinese. And what I marked in gray is what I want to talk about today. So in the previous section, Dogen talked about Zazen being like a dragon returning to the water, like a tiger taking to the mountains. And the true Dharma appears of itself, so that from the start dullness and distraction are struck aside. And I talked about different ways to work with dullness or sleepiness and too much intellectual activity. So in one case, our center, you could say, is maybe too much high up. In the other case, we're kind of in a down mood. And what does he say then? When you arise from sitting, move slowly and quietly, calmly and deliberately. Don't do it head over heels. Understand that those who transcended the mundane and the sacred died while, and here again there's a spelling mistake. It's not about, you don't need the Y in here. They died on the cushion, so to speak, but not only on the cushion, but also sitting or standing. And the character which I translated as died could also mean less exaggerated, just forgot themselves. They all forgot themselves, either sitting or standing. So during the 24 hours of the day, having all committed themselves entirely to this power. And 2 weeks ago, I kind of talked about that Dogen Zenji here intentionally is avoiding to speak about samadhi, a word, a concept that you find a lot in the original Chinese text that Dogen Zenji is basing his instructions on. But the problem with samadhi is you can become very attached to this concept. And it's always about how deep is my samadhi now? Have I reached it? When am I going to get into the next level of samadhi? Anyway, now I want to start with the next paragraph. In addition, it starts. In addition, turning the Dharma wheel with a finger, a banner, a needle, or a mallet. And all of these words here, banner isn't quite literal, like in the original. Actually, the Chinese character for that is a pole. I think with all of these phrases, finger, banner, needle, or mallet, Dogen Zenji is referring to koans, exchanges between students and masters in Chinese Zen. For example, finger, probably he's referring to a Zen master whose name in Japanese is pronounced Gute. And whenever somebody asked Gute a question, whatever the question was, Gute would just raise his finger. That would be his answer. And one day, maybe Gute was busy. A guest came and wanted to speak with Gute, but he was busy. So one of his students greeted the guest instead, and the guest asked some question. And the student raised his hand, his finger. And when Gute heard about that, he called the student and chopped off his finger. And the student ran off crying with pain. And then Gute called him, "Hey, stop." And when the student turned around, Gute held his finger up. And at that point, the student was enlightened. And with the needle, actually, I'm not quite sure what the needle is referring to, the banner or the pole. I think that's the story how Ananda a student of the Buddha, got enlightened. So Ananda was the one who had the best memory. He had memorized all of the teachings of the Buddha, but during the lifetime of the Buddha, he didn't reach enlightenment. So it was Mahakashapa, or in Japanese Mahakasho, who inherited the Dharma from the Buddha. And whenever Mahakashapa would give a talk in the temple, they would raise a banner on the pole. So they had this pole in front of the temple, and whenever there was a Dharma talk, they would raise up this banner. And one day the banner was up, but I think Mahakashapa didn't give a talk for some reason. There was no talk. And I think Ananda asked him, so why is there no Dharma talk today? The banner is up. And then Mahakashapa told him, get the banner down, get the banner down. And when Ananda heard that, he got enlightened, obviously. With the needle, I'm not quite sure what the needle is referring to, but mallet, it might be the sixth patriarch who was, I think, pounding rice in a mallet, using a mallet, and then later inherited the Dharma from the fifth patriarch. Realizing it with a whisk, that's what many priests use, probably in old China, but also in Japan today. It's a kind of a symbol of being a priest. And in the old days, I think they also used the whisk to chase away flies, or maybe to clean the path when they walked. A fist, for example, Rinzai, often, when you asked Rinzai a question, he would punch the guy who asked the question in the face. A staff could also be used in that way, to hit somebody with it, or a shout. Rinzai, again, was famous for shouting out loud. These cannot be understood by discriminative thinking. In Soto Zen, we don't use koans in the same structured way as in Rinzai, although Dogen Zenji in the Shobogenzo is always quoting koans, or like here, he's always making references to koans. The reason why in Soto we don't do it in such a structured way is because Zazen in itself is a koan, and life in itself is a koan. But when I return to Germany, usually every year, late summer, early autumn, I return to Germany, and I do sessions in Germany together with a Rinzai master. And when the two of us do sessions together, we give doksan, so talks. There's meetings between the students and ourselves, and there are koan exchanges. And for example, one of those koans is there's a fan in the room, and the master puts the fan in front of the student. And he says, if you call this thing here, if you call it a fan, I will beat you with the stick 30 times. But if you don't call it a fan, if you say it's not a fan, I will also beat you with a stick 30 times. So what is this? That's the first koan. And another koan is, for example, there's this bell in the room, and the teacher will ask, is this bell inside your mind or outside your mind? And most people think, well, it's common sense that it's outside of my mind, but in Buddhism, everything, the whole universe is part of my consciousness. So maybe inside my mind is the right answer, but actually inside the mind is not the right answer. So next people try saying, well, maybe it's neither inside nor outside my mind. Or they say, maybe it's both inside my mind or outside the mind. And of course, all of these are not the answers. And the next koan is, there's a flower in the room, and the master asks, is this flower dead or alive? It's a flower in a vase, so it's not really alive anymore, but it's also not really dead. But again, Also, with the flower, the answer is not dead or alive. With all of these koans, and also the finger, the banner, the needle, the mallet, the point is stop thinking about the thing, or stop thinking about the meaning that could be behind it, but rather get on a level where you really get into contact with the thing. In case of the fan, it's not a question about how, if you call it a fan or if you're not calling it a fan. It's the question is, how do you get in touch with reality, in touch with the reality of this fan, or how do you get in touch with the reality of this finger, or a mallet, or a staff, or a shout, or a whisk? How do you get in touch with that? That's the point of Zen, getting in touch with reality, not, how do you say, developing an understanding of reality is not the point. It's not about understanding reality or seeing through reality. It's about getting in touch with it. So much from my side. Maybe Xuanzan, if you want, you can translate into Chinese.
我简单的说一下啊，刚才老师这段我觉得说的特别好。他前面几次其实老师讲了，就是呃前面我简单的接一下啊，就前面老师讲到了，好像那个龙看到水，然后它本来龙在水里面，但是它发觉了自己在水里面，然后虎它本来在山里面，但是它察觉到自己在山里面，这是我们之前讲的，然后之前还讲到了坐禅的，就是你的坐姿啊，然后还有一些就是你做完了坐禅结束之后，不要马上结束，要把坐禅的感觉带到生活当中，这是我们上次讲的。然后，老师还讲到了里面有一个坐脱力王，就是长观超梵乐圣坐脱力王，这里面指到一个王字，其实这个王它确实是有死亡的意思，但是其实在这里面也是放手，不要追逐的意思。然后今天老师重点讲了后面这一句，况复沾指干针锥之转机，这个好有点绕嘴。就是它里面其实讲到了两个公案，其实在就是大家应该有所察觉了，就是道元禅师他每次在说到要入定或者我们瑜伽里面叫 samadhi 的时候，他都绕着说，他不会直接告诉你啊，我们要入定，我们要找到samadhi。他其实的意思就是说，让我们不要关注于真的要入定，不要关注于呃这个目标，要关注于正在做的坐禅，正在做的禅修。然后他这句话，今天我们读的这句话，它其实有两个公案，然后里面其中的一个呢，指的是一个手指，它不是写的是矿指沾指，还有一个是千针锥之转机，对吧？矿指好，这里面好像指的是矿指沾指，好像就那个人叫啥？我看叫 Gute，就是那个中文我不知道怎么说，日语是这个名啊，就是有一个禅师，不管别人问他什么问题，他的回答都是用一个手指指向天，然后别人问他什么问题，他回答都是一样的。然后有一次呢，他的一个学生非常的失落，哭了，就是哭得很伤心，问他一个问题，然后这老师他也是用手指了指天，然后突然他那个学生就醒悟了，就好像就入定了，就像我们那个家里面讲，他找到了 samadhi 的感觉，他就是，然后这是一个，还有一个就是那个干的意思，中文我不知道怎么说，刚刚老师说那个 Mahakashapa 应该也是一个和尚啊，就是一个禅师，他每一次就是给大家做，也是就像这种就是做给大家讲课吧，讲学哈，然后每一次那个钟好像是有一个杆子， 挂到上面，然后他每次都讲，然后突然有那个阿南达有一天问他，老师你今天怎么不说话了呢？你今天不跟我们上课了吗？然后呢然后那个老师说你把上面那个杆子放下来，然后老师说完那句话了之后，那个阿南达就是那个和他的那个大弟子啊，就好像入定了，一下就醒悟过来了，幡然醒悟。然后这是另外一个，这两个那个公案，我们待会儿下课我可以帮大家在网上找一找啊，看看应该是有原文。所以他那个道元禅师这句话其实是里面涵盖了这两个两个公案啊，然后后面还有一个是，嗯，就是呃，曹洞宗其实他是不太讲究公案的，但是你像临济宗呢，或者是其他的一些就是禅修的其他的一些宗派吧，大家可能你像就是有一些公案，大家在做公案的时候呢。就是临济宗，他有一个传统是问完问题之后会打那个人的脸，就一拳捶到那个人脸上，或者是把他的公案喊出来。但是我们曹洞宗就是老师我们禅修道元禅师这是没有这样的。道元禅师认为，其实坐禅就是你在坐禅，就是已经本身是公案了，我们没有必要去学习公案或者是狡辩这些公案。但是也是有不同的这个说法的哈。老师每次回德国的时候呢，他都会参加德国有一个接心，他和另外其他一些那个老师是临济宗的，那吴芳老师他是曹洞宗的嘛，所以他们在一起做接心的时候呢，结束的时候也会在一块讨论，然后他们就会做公案的一个交换。比如说，他给举了3个例子啊，比如说那个老师会问你，拿着一个扇子在你面前，然后老师会问你，嗯，你说我手里拿着这是什么？如果你回答是扇子的话，那我会用这个打你30次。如果你回答它不是扇子的话，我也会打你30次。那你说我手里拿的到底是什么？这是一个公案啊，然后还有一个就是，我看这个啊，对对，就是刚才老师手里拿着那个敲的钵，就是我们上课坐禅那个钵，拿在手里边儿，然后就会问你，你看我手里边拿的是什么？拿着这个钵是在你的头脑里呢，还是在你的头脑外面？然后有的人就会说，当然在外面了。然后但是佛说一切都在你的头脑里啊，他不在你的脑子里面吗？可是你说他确实是在外面，他怎么会在你脑子里呢？就是你怎么说都不对啊，这是另外一个公案。然后老师还举了一个公案，就是屋里有一个干花儿，然后老师说会问你这个花儿是有生命的还是没有生命的？如果它是死的话，你看它就是一朵花儿啊，它还是很鲜活的在那儿。但是你说它是生的吗？可是它已经干死了呀。那这朵花儿它是有生命还是没有生命？就类似这种问题啊，就是大家不断的讨论，翻来覆去的问你，翻来覆去问你，这个就是公案，它其实是没有一个正确答案的。但是大家一直在讨论左边右边左边右边，一直在讨论这件事情。所以，就为什么要讨论这个公案呢？其实是为了告诉大家要停止思考，就是你不要想你面前的这个东西，你不要想它是什么，它在哪儿，它有什么意义。我们不要想这件事情，或者是你面前的这个事物，我们应该想的是，比如说老师刚才说的那个扇子，或者是那朵花儿，或者是你的手，或者是你的手指向哪儿。刚才老师说的那个问你问题，手一指向天，指向哪儿？我们应该和这些东西建立联系，是你怎么和这个事实有关联的。其实这个比较重要，而不是这个事实它有什么意义，你怎么和它有关联，你怎么和它建立联系的。其实这个才是真正的事实，而不是你看到那个东西是事实。所以其实不是说你明不明白，比如说刚才老师说的一个问题，比如说这个它是有生命还是没有生命，它到底在哪儿，它这个是什么？其实我们没有必要，我们的关注点不应该在它的意义，或者是你真的明不明白它，而是你怎么跟它有了联系，我们怎么和它建立联系。其实这个才是我们应当关注的，而且我们应该停止思考它到底是什么。然后停止思考我们到底明不明白，这是老师刚才说的。
Thank you. It's already time for question and answers, but before that, I want to return to the text once more because there's a short sentence that maybe I should do as well. So when it's about this question, what is this? Don't call it a fan, but don't say it's not a fan either. Or is this object here inside your mind or outside your mind? And neither answer is right. You can't solve these questions with discriminative thinking. And then Dogen Zenji says, much less can they be known through the practice of supernatural power. And I think something that he wants to say there is, he wants to warn us that the answer is something really mystical. We have to have some kind of mystical experience to get into grasp with reality. We think getting in touch with reality must be something that's a privilege of the really enlightened. It's not about supernatural powers. And it's also not about thinking about reality. It's more direct. It's actually, well, something that 2-year-old, 3-year-old kids are doing all the time. It's just that we have forgot about it. So when you hear it's not about discriminative thinking, you can't grasp it with the ordinary mind. Don't think it's something supernatural. It's some mystical experience. No, it's even more everyday than our so-called everyday mind. It's more everyday than that. It's the most everyday thing you can imagine. But okay, so much for today. After Xuanzang's translation, please ask questions if you have any.
然后老师讲了后面一小句，就把这一段儿，这一部分内容结束。刚才后面就是举福权鹤棒之正气，它其实指的是它那个，这句话里面写的那个福，其实就是那个浮尘，就像我们道士那个浮尘，大家都知道，就是有达克悲生啊，然后就是也有那个福，然后后面什么刚才那什么棒鹤之正气，就是刚才老师说的什么互相喊呀，然后打拳，就是那个问问题。然后后面他说的是非是思量分辨之所能解，就是说我们不用想，刚才老师说我手里拿的这个是扇子还不是扇子，或者是这个东西，就是这个波，它在你的头脑里面还是在外面？我们不用想，非是思量分辨之所能解，不是你这样想来想去可以真正分辨出来的，不是你这么思考来思考去，我们争论来争论去，真正可以得到一个完美答案的。然后，老师说，我们总以为好像这个回答必须得是很玄妙，好像这个回答必须得是一个我们谁都听不懂的一个答案，它才正确，好像这才能证明我们已经入定了。如果这个答案不玄妙，如果这个答案只是直接的话，好像我们就认为它不是事实。其实事实是小孩子都知道的一个事实，2、3岁的孩子一直都在做这件事情，他不会再想面前这个东西是什么，他只是看到了这个东西，而且他和他这个东西产生联系。我们小孩子特别小的孩子都知道，而我们却没有直接，我们好像丧失了这种看到事实的能力。我们认为直接的和一个东西产生关系，好像就不是这个它本身的意义一样，好像我们太直接就不好。所以其实我们其实是非是思量分辨之所能解，它其实很多时候呢，不是我们能够分辨出来的，直接一点反而是我们想要的答案。大概是这个。
Okay, thank you. Q&A session starts. If you have questions or anything you would like to share, you're welcome to do so. Please. No questions? Tanya, please.
I just finished a session with a person who is going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, first time, and she knows for 2 years she's going to die. And now she says, okay, there's no hope. I don't want to die.
Mm.
I feel sad.
Mm.
I think there should be no death. Yeah, what's your answer?
I mean, the Zen answer to dying is when you die, you die. But when she says, I don't want to die, you have to accept that as well. So you have to accept you're gonna die and there's no answer to death than dying. But you also have to accept that I don't want to die. Actually, who was it? Ikkyu-san, the famous Ikkyu-san, who was a little bit a crazy monk in Japan. I think his last words when he was dying was, I don't want to die. And that's how he died. That's also a way to die. So you have to accept you're going to die. And if you're honest, most of us don't want to die. So you have to accept that as well. Zen doesn't mean to die and say, I'm happy to die, or I don't really care about dying. You're gonna die. There's no way around that. But it's okay to die without not wanting to die. I think it's okay to also accept that.
Thank you.
Of course, the fact that you don't want to die will not change the fact that you will die. But still, if you don't want to die, accept that you don't want to die. Just as when you're angry, Buddhism tells us not to be angry. But the first step always needs to be, well, you have to accept that you are angry. I'm angry. And only when you can accept that, you can be more accepting maybe of the person you're angry with. So if you can forgive yourself for being angry, maybe you can also then forgive the other person. If you can accept that you don't want to die, maybe it becomes easier to accept the fact that you're still gonna die.
Yeah.
And most of us, we do it the other way around. We try to somehow ignore, or how do you say, negate the fact that I'm angry. No, I'm not angry. No, I'm not afraid of death. But who's going to believe that if we don't even believe it ourselves? So, yeah, you are afraid of death. So accept that first.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ikkyu-san didn't want to die. And there's this other famous monk somewhere in China, I think, and robbers came into the temple and they cut his throat and he cried, "Wah, help!" And Hakuin had, I think, great doubts about that. Why would an enlightened Zen master cry for help? But actually, well, in that moment, that was his expression of enlightenment, crying, "Wah, help me, help me." And there's lots of koans that go exactly in this direction.
Just be the crying.
Yeah. Like for example, if when the student got his finger cut off, probably he didn't want that. He didn't like it. What did he realize at that moment that his finger cut off? It's also one of the koans. Oh. And I mean, death is kind of the extreme version of that. Like, you don't want to die, but you die. How do you do that? How do you do that? That's also koan, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else? Yeah, I can't read your name, but one of the Chinese students has a question.
Excuse me, I want to ask a question about meditation.
Yes.
When we sit there and many thoughts in my mind,
Yes.
how to clean them, how to empty my mind or focus on my breath or something else. How to do that is very difficult for me. This is my question.
We often talk in Zen about emptying the mind, but for me the point is not of making your mind empty. It's more like your mind is like the sky. Sometimes there are no clouds, sometimes there are clouds. But it's no problem for the sky if there are clouds. You just should take care that you don't kind of ride with the clouds. And that's what often happens during Zazen. So if you're doing Zazen, your ears will hear sounds, your eyes will see what's in front of you. If you keep the eyes open, you feel your body. And also your consciousness will be aware of thoughts. And that's no problem. The problem starts if you kind of try to catch these thoughts or you try to avoid the thoughts. So the moment you say, I want to have an empty mind, I need to get rid of the thoughts, you're already in trouble because it doesn't work.
Yes.
It's just
Yes,
like
yes.
telling yourself, I'm not going to think about a pink elephant. In that moment, you think about the pink elephant.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
So one metaphor I sometimes use is these thoughts in our minds, they're like a merry-go-round, always turning. Like in somewhere, I don't know, in China, probably you also have these amusement parks. It's like a merry-go-round in an amusement park. And what we usually do is we jump into it. We sit in the merry-go-round, and then the whole world is turning. In Zazen, what we don't try is we don't try to stop the merry-go-round. It's rather that you become like a mountain, and from the top of the mountain, you look on that amusement park. The amusement park is still there. The merry-go-round is still turning. But it's only one part of the whole scenery. And you try to avoid to jump into the merry-go-round. It's still going to happen. And when during these 30 minutes of Zazen you realize, oh, I've been lost in thoughts, the moment you realize it, rather than tell yourself, oh, again, I did it wrong, rather the moment you realize I've been thinking, that's a great realization, because in that moment you're back in the moment. Wow, I realized I've been thinking. Probably 30 seconds ago, 1 minute ago, you were thinking, but you didn't even realize it. But then out of a sudden you realize, I've been thinking. And in that moment, if it helps you, can return to the breath, to the physical sensation, try to stay there for a while, and thoughts will still come up. And well, the aim is to allow the thoughts to be there without riding on them. But it's going to happen again and again. It happens to all of us that before we realize it, we're thinking. But then we realize we are thinking. And at that moment, just return. Or already in that moment, you realize you're thinking. You have returned to this moment. And well, you just try to stay there. The moment you're realizing I'm thinking, basically you're back on the mountain in that moment. Because it's only from the mountain that you realize you're thinking. When you're sitting in the merry-go-round, you don't think I'm thinking, you think the world is turning. The world is turning around. But then, out of a sudden, you become the mountain again and you say, oh no, the merry-go-round is turning. There's thoughts there, but you don't attach yourself to the thoughts anymore. That's not so easy, but well, the most important thing is don't try to erase the thoughts, don't try to suppress the thoughts. It's okay that there are clouds in the sky. The clouds in the sky don't obstruct the sky.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Also, there's some interesting exchange in the chat. If we lived forever, then we would have no motivation to do anything. Yeah, so we don't want to die, but living forever is also not such an attractive option on the other hand. Living for, well, 200 years, okay, maybe, but forever is very long. We would get tired of existing for eternity and wish we would die. Probably, yes, yeah. The sound has become distorted. Is it okay again, or is it still distorted? It's okay now. Chris is raising his hand.
Yeah, I didn't have a question until the last question about the practical question about what's going on during Zazen.
Yes.
And so I wanted to ask you, it sounds like you're generally focusing, like long ago someone asked you, you can focus on like one point, or
Yes.
you can try to focus on one thing, but
Yes.
it sounds like you can also have more of a broad attention. Yes. You're observing everything. You say you're listening.
Yes.
You kind of feel your body. You have visual field there. It sounds like you're generally not focused kind of on one thing and taking everything in.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of in the example of where like I'll get pain in one spot in my body and like I can try to ignore it, but that won't really work many times. Or I could try to focus in on it and make that like object, but then I kind of focusing too much on it might not be good.
Mm.
So like the first part of the question is, yeah, is it okay to focus in on one thing like in your body instead of focusing on everything at once?
Yes.
And then the second part of the question is, I find sometimes then using my breath, like I know it's pretty much not recommended to move at all. But like if you have a very subtle breathing in a painful part of your upper body, sometimes that can kind of help without you're not really moving, but the breath is moving. So that's the second part of my question is the first is it okay to focus in on one part? And the second is it okay to kind of focus in on the breath to help pain?
Yeah, I think probably I talked about it about 2 times ago, maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks ago, when it was about dullness and distraction. How about how to work with that? So if you're too tense and there's lots of mental activity, it probably helps to open up the consciousness rather than focus on one part to open up. And that's what I usually try to do. So I usually aim at what some people call panorama awareness. So you open it up in all directions and all of my senses are active. But that's not the only way to work. Like you can focus on one point and that can help, for example, if you tend to be a little bit dreamy, sleepy, it helps you to become more sharp. So you can work with both ways. And I was kind of talking about, well, the thumbs, if you keep them to the body, it helps you to be more focused. If you have them more relaxed, it helps to kind of have a more wider, opened up consciousness. So the answer to your first question would be yes, it's totally okay to focus on one point. Also with the eyes. You can focus on one point with the eyes if you want to do that, or to open up and kind of allow the whole field of vision kind of to be part of your consciousness. That's what I do, but some people also focus on one point and try to keep their awareness there. And that's also okay. It changes the quality of the meditation, but it's not that one is bad and the other one would be good. The second part of the question, I would also say, yes, some people actually recommend, if you have very strong pain, rather than try to ignore it or fight against it, breathe gently through the pain. Of course, well, you can only breathe through the nose. You don't breathe through the pain. But if you have pain in the knees, imagine that gently you're breathing out through the pain in the knees. Or if it's in a different part of the body, you're breathing through the pain, so to speak. And that can help to just let the pain go, or rather one would have to say allow the pain to just be there and gently breathe in and out through that pain. So I think that's certainly one thing you could work with, or if you already did that and it helped you, it's certainly something I would continue. Thank you. Any other questions that you would like to ask today? No more questions? If not, I thank you for coming. And next Monday, I will be here again with Schwan. Next Monday, it's going to be about Savaki's quotes to you again. And we get back to today's topic in 2 weeks. In 3 weeks is Chinese New Year. Will it be a holiday then? Will we skip in 3 weeks?
It depends. Do you have time? I'll follow your schedule.
I have time. For me, Chinese New Year is really not part of my calendar here in Japan. But if for you and your students, it's a big thing, we don't have to do it either way. But well, the next 2 times we're gonna be here, and maybe also in 3 weeks, because I have time in 3 weeks as well. Okay, thank you, and if you like, come back. See you again. Thank you, Schwan-san, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.